Hey guys, and welcome to the review of the GINAULT silent service. I've had this for the last 3 to 4 weeks. It's rarely been off my wrist. So I've got a little bit of a more detailed review for you coming today. It has been a very, very good experience with this watch. I wasn't sure whether I would kind of resent it for not being an Ocean Rover 2. If you know the GINAULT lineup, the Ocean Rover has been the staple and the only model available for the last number of years. So this is a little bit of a departure for them. Brand new line, new watch, new design. It keeps a lot of the same design cues, which is, I think, a good move. But it has its own personality. So if you watch the other review I did, it was basically a quick comparison between the silent service and the Ocean Rover 2, which is one of my favorite watches ever, in fact. But today I'm going to focus in on the silent service, talk through the aesthetics, sizing, a little bit of the kind of features, the things I like and don't like about the watch. The don't like list is pretty minimal, so I'm going to kind of cover those a little bit later. But for now, this is the GINAULT silent service. This particular model is the diver. There is a diver and a traveler. So basically you choose the bezel you want and you can configure the watch in different ways. You are talking about a retail value of $14.99 for this model, up to about $17.99 depending on how you configure the watch, whether you add a date wheel with Cyclops, that kind of thing. So there's a number of different configurations you can choose from. This is by far the most symmetrical, I find. I'm not the biggest fan of the traveler style bezel. I think it's a little bit simplistic, and one of the things that I've grown to love about this watch is the detail in it. You know, the symmetry around the dial and the bezel, the way all the lines work together for that kind of consistent flow. Personally, if I was buying one of these myself, I would probably choose the date with Cyclops, just because I like the extra complication. I'm a fan of both of those things, and indeed, sure, on my Ocean Rover 2, I've got both and I love it. So that would be my kind of choice. But if you're looking for the absolute most simplistic, clean, symmetrical design, the dive bezel with no date is going to be the way you probably want to go. So that's the model I have today. That's the one I've been wearing for the last couple of weeks, and that's the one I'm going to review. So first of all, let's talk about dimensions. It's a little bit of a departure, but not really, in terms of this versus the Ocean Rover 2. We've got a 41mm case, so slightly bigger than the 40mm on the Ocean Rover 2. We have similarly got 20mm between the lugs, which is identical to the Ocean Rover 2. The one thing you will notice about this compared to that is the chunkiness of the lugs. It's a lot more aggressive look, and then when you couple that with the aggressive bezel, it is a different look entirely, but you still get that very classic 20mm between the lugs. Wing to wing, it is 47mm, kind of top to toe. Perfect wearability, really. 47mm lug to lug, and then you've got a 41mm case. This is a lot more, as I explained in the comparison video, a lot more of a slab-like case. Kind of reminds me a little bit more of, for instance, the Tudor Black Bay. A little bit more slab-like, industrial kind of look on the side. Absolute fingerprint magnet, I'm not gonna lie to you. I should have worn gloves today. But it is an absolutely beautiful design. It's a little bit less of a flare out. If you watch that other comparison video, you'll see the similarities and differences, but you don't get like a kind of flare out of the lugs like you do on the Ocean Rover. It's just a bit more kind of slab-like, which I really like. I think it's a good departure. If they had just kept the same case, it wouldn't have made sense. So the dimensions are very, very wearable, really comfortable to wear. I've enjoyed wearing it over the last 3 weeks, and like I say, I haven't really had it off the wrist except when I've gone for certain watches like an Ocean Rover 2. So what you get in the kit, for a moment, we'll kind of diverge from this and come back to the watch. If you are familiar with GINAULT at all, you'll know the kit. It's identical to the Ocean Rover kits. You get this very nice but clean, simple leather box, contrast stitching, GINAULT logo there. When you open it up, you've got the hand-built in America pouch that houses your warranty card, your regulation timings, and your Microbrand, or microfiber, not Microbrand, it kind of is a Microbrand cloth, but it's a microfiber cloth for polishing. You get a pretty simplistic cushion, very nice though, good quality. You get extra links in there apparently from sizing, and you get your screwdriver tool for changing the bracelet. I will say this at the outset, the screwdriver tool on these kits is exceptional. Really high quality, very precise, really well put together. If you have experience with subpar tools, you'll know what I mean. This is really precise. It works perfectly with the bracelet, and is a really high quality tool. So that's the box. You get your microfiber cloth, you get your regulation timing sheet. All of these models come with an SW200-1 Sellita high beat movement. They've stopped doing the ETAs due to production issues, supply chain issues. Very hard to get the ETAs at the moment. So you're getting a Sellita in all of these. When they released the Ocean Rover 2, they used to do like a choice. You could pick one or the other, and they would build it for you. So the original Ocean Rover I had, I think I've had like 7 or 8 at this stage, but the original one I had, I'd chosen ETA, and that was like the initial pre-sale run that they did, but they're completely doing SW200s. So great movement, high beat movement. The difference is between this and other micro brands is that they are regulating this in-house for 6 weeks before shipping it out. And I know that they only produce maybe a couple of watches a week, which is an interesting fact when you consider, it's not just a standard, right, we're releasing 300 and we're going to do a production run, put them all together and ship them out. Everything is done by hand with GINAULT, which I really appreciate. And there's a couple of little nuances with the case polishing and of course being assembled by hand that I think is just next level for a micro brand. But you get this little chart showing the different seconds lost and gained over the 6-week measurement period, and then the kind of final value with which it is shipped out. So that's a really cool, very high quality card, very nicely done with the kind of gilt inflections there. Then you've got your warranty card. Nothing massively exciting here. You get some information, you get the model, serial, the movement number in there. Nice gilt highlights as well, very high quality. That's all good. And then you have the watch. So let's get back into looking at this. Over and above the sizing that I talked about there, 41mm case, 20mm between the lugs, 47mm wingspan. Aside from it being wearable, it's really noticeable the quality of the materials that are used right off the bat. When you look at this watch, you notice the dial, you notice the applied indices, you notice the sapphire bezel. The quality is pretty much what you would expect if you've come to know GINAULT and how the watches are put together. There really is nothing at this price point. You're talking $14.99 to $17.99 depending on the configuration. You can get it on pre-sale at the minute, $10.39 up to $12.99. And at those prices, there is nothing in the marketplace. And I've trust me, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of different models over the last number of years, from Oris to Tag Heuer, in that kind of established brand range, anything in the micro brand range. I won't mention names, but at that price point, there is nothing that compares to the build quality of this, period. I believe strongly that this brand is doing something that no other micro brand is doing, from the attention to detail in the build, the regulation of the movement, the assembly of the watch, hand built in America. Yeah, you don't get the Swiss made kind of moniker on the dial, but I do enjoy that kind of hand built in America. I don't know if you'll see it's very small on the dial, but precision is kind of GINAULT's calling card, if you will. So the impact of the watch I think is great. Very, very symmetrical design. I love the dive bezel, the detail on this. Up top you've got a sapphire crystal, box crystal, so you'll see it steps up a good bit. Creates a nice little effect with the light as it glints off that box crystal. It's got a flat top on it. Of course you can have the Cyclops if you go for the date variant, but great crystal. You see right into the dial, beautiful clarity. Crystal to crystal, I'm sure there are some nuances of how the dial would appear through a crystal. I can tell that this is a high quality sapphire crystal. Very, very good clarity as you look through into the dial. The dial markers themselves, all applied indices around the edge, all loomed. Hand kit is loomed as well. Honestly, when you see the applied indices, you see the precision of the engineering that goes into this. Not every applied indices is the same. You know, you tend to think, oh, that looks nice. On this one, the quality and precision of the cutouts and the looming on it is next level. It's absolutely fantastic. You kind of notice it when the light glints off it. The precision is great. It's noticeable. That's all I can say about it. The hand kit itself is what you would expect from GINAULT, same as the Ocean Rover 2. You have the very modern minute and hour hand and that nice red seconds hand sweeping round. On this model, they've done the silent service, the model name, in red as well, so you get that little pop of color, which I really appreciate. I think it matches in nicely, especially because the only color available in this watch is the black on black. So it just adds that little pop of color, little inflection, little, you know, something a bit different about it. You know, if you talk about homage watches, the Ocean Rover 2 is definitely my favorite homage piece ever. Probably the best ever homage piece that's been made. The one thing though that really sets it apart for me is that I hate Mercedes hands. I can't stand them. And so when you've seen homage after homage use the Mercedes hands, and then you get a nice clean, crisp, modern hand kit like is on these watches, I think it really adds something to the package, makes it stand out a little bit. And then when you balance in the build quality on these, it's another level. If we look then around the case, we've got a really aggressive bezel, much more industrial than the Ocean Rover 2 and potentially what you would expect. Really nice teeth on it, very, very easy to turn and very comfortable, not sharp or anything, even though they are these kind of square blockish like teeth. The bezel action on these is, again, next level. I compare this, you know, like for like in terms of pricing to an Oris Aquis or something like that. The bezel action on this is head and shoulders above what you would get out of an Oris. You can hopefully hear and sort of feel it when I do this kind of close up. It's not really like a notchy turn of a bezel. You know, if you take like a Microbrand watch, albeit, you know, half the price, but you take a watch like Veneziana Go Naride, which is a great watch, I really like it. But if you take that bezel, you have a very, you know, standard bezel. It's kind of notchy as it goes round, which is what you get on almost all watches. Outside of, you know, you step up to like a Tudor Black Bay, you notice the quality and the mechanism of the bezel. The silent service is at that approximate level. It's a tactile, almost like a sonic turning effect. So it kind of glides around rather than notches. 120 click, 40 tooth bezel. So you'll hear hopefully this. It's definitely a more sonic approach with a glide rather than like this notchy thing, and there's not really any backplay at all. It's a very precise bezel action, incredibly well engineered, and like I say, I mean, I compare it to an Oris. The Oris set, which is one of my favorite brands, by the way, whether it's the Aquis or Diver 65, roughly the same price as this. The bezel action on those is very, very notchy. It's kind of uncomfortable to turn. This is just sublime. To be totally honest with you, it's an absolutely fantastic bezel mechanism. Now that leads me on to, I suppose, the first minor gripe or complaint that I've heard on the community forums about this watch, which is the bezel teeth alignment. Now on my watch, I've noticed that it's almost perfect. If you look at the top, that central notch is pretty much perfectly aligned with the 12. It's ever so slightly to the right, I feel, but I have noticed some minor gripes with people expecting that to perfectly match up. I hadn't even thought about it until I heard that minor complaint, and then I sort of looked back at some of the prototypes and I noticed that it's more off, you know, in comparison to what I have received here. It doesn't bother me. I honestly hadn't even looked at it, even though I'm pretty, you know, finicky about certain details. I hadn't noticed it until it was kind of brought to my attention on the community forums. So it doesn't impact me, it doesn't affect my perspective of the watch, but I understand that some people have kind of, you know, been a little bit sort of put off by it. It's not something I noticed, so it honestly, it's maybe something that they could have done. I think it does line up if you actually look at the alignment of, you know, the little notches. It's maybe slightly to the right on my bezel insert. I looked then at the Ocean Rover 2, and although it's a completely different design of bezel, many more little notches, it actually does perfectly match up with the little teeth at the top. It's perfectly centered. So I don't know if that's something that they are looking at or thinking about. If there's a way that they can perfectly align it for future models in the production run, great. If not, it doesn't bother me, but if it does bother you, just to be aware of it. But the bezel itself, the action is genuinely, I think that's the best word for it, sublime. It feels beautiful to use, and that's really important for me. Most bezels are kind of notchy and loads of backplay and imprecise, and sometimes you get a Microbrand that maybe hasn't quite aligned the bezel at the top. These bezel actions are perfect. So just to say that, it's a slight upgrade over the Ocean Rover 2 as well. So if you know the Ocean Rover 2, the original bezel action they used, or at least the original kind of configuration that they used, was very hard to move on some models. I've owned maybe 7 or 8, and as they've gone through the production run, they've become nicer, easier to move. And so this particular Ocean Rover 2, which is my latest one, has that kind of glide system to it. But the silent service is actually even better. So that's just something to note. I've noticed it's smoother, silkier, potentially even more precise. So that's something just to note on that. Okay, case side then. When you look at the profile again, we've got this kind of slab-like look, which I really like. We've got the GINAULT crown, a little bit more industrial than the Ocean Rover 2, so it matches in perfectly with the bezel. It's been really well designed in that regard. Very, very smooth movement on the crown. The way they do these, so it pops out, there is a ghost setting there, as if you would have a date. Pop it out to change the time. Very, very smooth action on this, and you'll see the crown stem there. So really, you know, nice, thick, industrial, weighty kind of crown stem. It's pretty much you know, akin to like a Tudor Black Bay. That's you know, one that I have noticed when I'm using it and it comes out. It's really, really solid, no kind of movement in it, and just a really smooth setting mechanism, as you would expect out of a Sellita. So again, really nice there. The other thing I'll say about the case is the detail here with the polished bevel that goes around through the lugs and down the other side. It just creates that really nice play on the light as it kind of goes around, and it's, you know, very, very well done. I noticed on my original Ocean Rover 2 that the and again it goes to the kind of concept of these being hand built or hand assembled. The polishing at the end of the lugs can be slightly different depending. So this one kind of curves out a little bit, this one's a little bit more flat, but it's all been done by kind of hand. So it's finished by hand, which I think is superb. You know, you have that attention to detail, the hand finishing, the brushing on the cases is great. And that kind of leads me on, I guess, to the bracelet. Now, the bracelet on my Ocean Rover 2, and I don't know whether this comes across in a video, but I may as well do the comparison while we're here. This is super silky. I normally, with a bracelet, I'll kind of, you know, go at it and see how it kind of rests on the finger. If it's jingly jangly, if it's tinny, maybe feels a bit light, maybe rattles when you kind of run along the links. But the Ocean Rover 2 bracelet is, again, it's almost like that sublime sort of feel. Very, very silky. The silent service uses a similar bracelet. What I will say, actually, just to have them side by side, one thing I noticed is that the tapering on the bracelet, even though it's 20mm between the lugs on both of them, you hopefully will see that the tapering on the bracelet of the silent service is a little bit sort of slower to progress. The Ocean Rover kind of tapers quickly and then goes into a thin bottom. The size is the same as far as I'm aware, but the tapering on the silent service is a little bit slower to reduce. It's kind of a more consistent reduction rather than this kind of sweep, but I think it matches better with the more aggressive lug design and the more aggressive bezel, and it creates a little bit more of a kind of chunkier wrist presence when it's on the wrist. So I think that's been done really well. The silkiness of the bracelet so far is very, very nice. It's a great bracelet. It's not quite as silky as my Ocean Rover 2, but I have had that for the last year or so in the blue ceramic. So it's kind of worn in. It's a little bit more kind of, it is a little bit kind of smoother and silkier, but the bracelet on the silent service is fantastic, as you would hope and expect. So again, great bracelet on that. Brings us around to the clasp. So identical clasp to the Ocean Rover 2. You get that, you know, Rolex style clasp. It's still one of my only complaints that I would love to see the GINAULT flower or rose or whatever it is right here on the clasp. I think it would just add that personalization to it and add a little bit more, you know, personality, I guess. So it's lovely. It's a great clasp, very well engineered, works really well. You can pop your fingernail in there and pop it open. It's not hard to open like some other clasps that are designed in the same way. Opens up, you got a really well engineered inner kind of mechanism, very, very smooth. If we go to the other side of the bracelet, then we have our kind of glide lock micro adjustments. So pop it up, slide it out or in, and then pop it down and that locks it. So it's a very nice mechanism, works really well for just on the fly adjustments when you're, you know, your wrist gets warmer or colder through the day. Great mechanism, very, very well put together. Screw links on this with big, bold screws. Again, going back to the screwdriver, very precise. These work fantastically well, no issues there. I did find at one point some of the screws, or one of the screws, sorry, just coming out a little bit. So I just tightened it a little. I'm not into Loctite or anything like that, but I did tighten it down when I noticed that. But the bracelet itself is excellent, very, very silky smooth, good weight to it. Screw links, very, very nice mechanism on those. You've got that glide lock mechanism on the clasp, and then everything else is pretty much silky smooth. Look at the case back then. It's what you may expect from GINAULT. Very simple, clean, a little bit different. You've got this kind of is it hexagonal? It's like a septagon, I assume that is the name, with 7 sides. But it's kind of got that angular case back, all polished, which hopefully you can kind of see there. Pretty simple around the edge. You've got GINAULT, stainless steel, water resistance and so on. It says 107 out of 113, which I assume is the number of the production. But it's pretty simple, and then you've got that kind of brush central circle in there. So really, really nice engineering. You'll see the case brushing as well is fantastic on the underside. But it's just a great, you know, well put together watch. Everything has a little bit of attention to detail to it. When it's on the wrist, then the 41mm case wears beautifully. It sits really well. I love that symmetrical look of the bezel with that sapphire. It just shines, you know, in the light. You've got the applied indices glowing as, you know, you kind of go round, they just glint off the light again, or the light glints off them. The hand kit's great. Dial is deep and rich. It's a funny one because in most lights it looks black, and then if you get sunlight on it, it kind of lightens it up. It appears like a grey dial almost. I would love to review the date model of this, because on the website I've noticed the kind of close-up of the date variant, and it looks exceptionally well cut out. I reviewed the other day an Alpina Pilot Heritage, which I have here, and I similarly noticed the date cutout in the window on that was just, and dial in general was superbly well engineered. So I'd be excited to see the silent service with that cutout feature. And again, if I was picking one, you know, to buy today, I'd probably go date with Cyclops. But if you're into symmetry, you're into you know, kind of clean design, this is definitely the one to go for, even over and above the Traveler model, which is your other choice, of course. So that, guys, is the silent service. I've been really, really impressed with this watch. I kind of expected to be, you know, I've had a lot of GINAULTs in here, and they're one of my favorite microbrands without doubt. I know there's like this, you know, history thing that, you know, people complain about them. I just don't see it at all. And, you know, I don't get involved in the social media nonsense. I just look at the watch for what it is, and there is no better microbrand watch in terms of build quality, attention to detail, or anything like that out there, to be totally honest. I know some people compare it maybe to like a Monta. I've owned a number of Montas. I think they're great. I think this is at least on par in terms of build quality and attention to detail. to say a Monta or a Ferrer, which is kind of similarly priced Microbrand, and I think at least they've really diverged the design on this to make it their own. It's a little bit has like a little bit of an Omega style feel about it, but it's certainly not a straight homage piece, and I think they've done a phenomenal job, as I hoped and expected they would. The last thing I'd like to look at is the Lume. We've kind of done the workaround of the entire watch. The Lume is one I absolutely adore on this because of the detail, because you've got that beautiful sapphire bezel insert with the Lume underneath. So let's get a Lume shot for you. Beautiful impact there. We've got that kind of blue Smurfs kind of style glowing Swiss Superluminova, I believe. Compare it to the Ocean Rover 2, really, really powerful Lume. Exceptional quality. I mean, I always loved the Ocean Rover 2 Lume, but I mean, look at that. The bezel lighting up, the applied indices lighting up, the hand kit, second hand little dot just sweeping around. It's exceptional, absolutely exceptional. I mean, I was blown away by it when I saw it. I think it's just such a symmetrical, beautifully engineered look. It just it's one of those ones that just really sings to you. Boom. And overall then, this is the GINAULT Silent Service. Certainly one of my favorite watches of the year so far. We're halfway through. There's not a lot I can complain about. The build quality on the dial, exquisite. The sapphire bezel insert, phenomenal. The movement they've used, great. Then they've regulated it for 6 weeks, fantastic. Silky smooth bracelet, it's an absolute stunner. If you can get one of these on pre-sale at $10.39 to $12.99 depending on your configuration, I think it's a no-brainer. I don't see any reason why you would not do it, unless there's a little bit of that kind of brand bias based on some of the social commentary about GINAULT as a brand. I don't get it. I think it's a phenomenal brand. Any communications I've had with John at GINAULT has been very, very pleasant. They've been so gracious. They've sent out review units. They've used my photographs online. And I mean, other brands do that, of course, but it's just, I've had a great experience with GINAULT. They've always been responsive. The quality of the watches has always been outstanding, so I have zero complaints. I love this as a new entry into the GINAULT lineup. It's an absolute keeper for me. I will probably get the dive bezel model with date and Cyclops myself in time. I think that's my ultimate. But it just wears great, looks great, wears great. You see this watch against another one at the same price point, and it's noticeable how much better built and put together this particular piece is. So that, guys, is the Silent Service by GINAULT. Do let me know if you have any queries or thoughts on the watch. If you're going for one, I would get in, because I imagine with demand kind of peaking, these are going to be harder to come by. The lead times will probably be longer moving forward, but it's a great piece. I highly recommend it. And so for now, guys, make sure you like the video, comment, let me know what you think, and hit that subscribe button and notification bell if you haven't already. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you for your time, guys. Take care, and have a great day.